Okay, I think that's been 10 seconds, so I think we'll get started. Thank you all for joining us. This is a meeting of the Administration Committee of the Wilmette Village Board. Mike, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Trustee Sullivan,
Here.
Trustee Barrow,
Here.
Trustee Dodd.
Here. Great, we're all here. Okay, I'm going to start with our usual, just read a couple comments. This has changed slightly, or just a couple thoughts in terms of how we're conducting this meeting. This meeting is being conducted remotely via Microsoft Teams software. The state of Illinois is still under portions of a stay-at-home order, which was issued by Governor Pritzker as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And as a result, all in-person meetings of the village have been canceled. The state has amended the Open Meeting Act to permit electronic meetings, and we are conducting our business in compliance with state law and the Open Meeting Act. This meeting is being broadcast live on local channel 6 and at the village's YouTube page. A recording of the meeting will be archived on the village's website. A remote meeting requires a different mechanic for public participation. So to ensure that our residents and other interested parties have the opportunity to participate in this meeting, we have solicited public comment via email. So if you sent an email to publiccomment@wilmette.com at least 2 hours prior to the start of this meeting, our staff has shared your comment with members of the committee. If your comment was received within 2 hours of the meeting, it will be included in the meeting minutes. Members of the public watching via YouTube Live wishing to comment during the designated public comment period may submit comments through the chat feature on YouTube Live, and a member of village staff will read your comment. For those who have contacted via Microsoft Teams or the telephone and wish to address the committee, I will ask people to speak up when it's time for public comment. Due to logistics, I will ask somebody to identify themselves if they would like to address the committee. We will then assemble the list and call on the individuals person by person. For those who choose to speak, I would like to remind you that you have 3 minutes. Comments from the public, no matter how they were received, will be recorded into the meeting minutes as we typically do. Okay, so with our meeting introductions complete, I'd like to move I'm just going to pull up the agenda here for a minute. Okay, so I'd like to move to item 2, which is approval of the minutes of the Administration Committee on September 3rd, September 3rd, 2020. So can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
And then a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, Mike, would you please call the roll to approve the minutes?
Trustee Sullivan,
Aye.
Trustee Barrow,
Aye.
Trustee Dodd.
Aye. Okay, great. Minutes are approved. So now we'll move on to the discussion of the boards and commissions. So, Mr. Brayman, can you pull up the just kind of the scope of the meeting?
Is the presentation up on everyone's screen?
Yes.
Okay.
So
That's fine.
Okay, so can I ask can we make sure that everybody who's on the call has themselves on mute? I am hearing some background noise. So I can see a couple of people are not on mute. I don't know. So I'm asking everybody, if you're not sure how to do that, you can kind of toggle. If you're on Microsoft Teams, you can kind of toggle yourself, and then there's a mute button that you would hit.
Trustee Dodd, Alex can mute everybody, and then you would just have to unmute yourself to speak. So Alex, why don't you go ahead and do that right now?
That'd be great.
Yep, will do.
Thank you. Okay, perfect. Although I seem to be able to still talk, so that's great. Okay, Mike, can you move to the scope of the meeting page? Okay, so I'm not going to go through this, but again, I'd just like to welcome everybody to our Administration Committee meeting today, and thank you all for joining us. This is our 4th meeting on this topic, and is intended to be our last meeting prior to presenting our full report to the village board. The primary topic of discussion for this evening will be what, if any, modifications we'd like to make to the appointment and selection process. As in the past, the materials for tonight's meeting were posted on our village website at wilmette.com, and it was also hopefully sent to most of you on Monday, and hopefully most of you received that who received interest in this topic. So I'm hopeful that most of you had an opportunity to review this prior to tonight's meeting. I'd also like to make sure all of you received a slight addendum that was sent out this morning from Mr. Brayman, which had a little bit additional information of what we'll talk about as it comes to the appointment and selection process. And this was really based on feedback from the community of some of the emails we received, as well as discussions I've had with staff, our village president, and a handful of residents who have reached out to me since the material was sent out. So I'm hopeful that this addendum will really help guide our discussions today. We're going to go tonight. We're going to start slightly differently than we did in our last meeting. We'd like to start with public comment so that those of you who wish to share your thoughts prior to our discussion could do so. This will help us guide our deliberations and allow us to make a final recommendation to the village board. For those of you who'd like to address us tonight, I'd like to encourage you to focus your comments on the selection and appointment process, as most of the other matters have been discussed today. Of course, if you have other comments on other things, we'd love to hear it, but really the main scope of tonight would be to kind of finalize our selection and appointment process. Depending on the outcome tonight, and I'm hopeful that we will reach some nice conclusions, it would be my goal that we will present our final report to the board on Tuesday, October 13th. And I think we can come back and revisit that at the end of the meeting. Do we think that we need, if for some reason we feel we need to meet again? So, okay, with that. So now I'd like to open it up for public comment. As I mentioned earlier, individuals are allotted up to 3 minutes to comment. This meeting is being conducted remotely, so I'll ask people who are watching on YouTube to submit live comments for staff to read while and while they're typing, I will ask if there are any individuals who have connected to the meeting via Teams or telephone who would like to address us. What you'll need to do is unmute yourself, and please just right now, just state your name if you would like to speak to us. And then we'll create a list of those, and then we'll have people speak in the order that we heard your name. So for those of you on Microsoft Teams, would you please unmute yourself and just say your name if you'd like to speak.
Peter Orr.
Peter Orr, yep.
Cindy Fay.
Thank you, Cindy. Anybody else who's on Microsoft Teams that would like to speak? Okay, we'll hold off a minute. Alex, was there anybody who requested you have any comments through YouTube Live?
At this time, no, there are no comments on YouTube.
Okay, great. So then that, so hearing that, I'm assuming that gave everybody enough time. Why don't we then just start with, is there anybody else who's on the phone? Let me just ask one more time if you didn't have time. Is there anybody else who's on the phone who would like to speak to us? So right now I have Peter and Cindy. Okay, great. So hearing that, Peter, why don't you get us started, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Trustee Dodd. Again, my name is Peter Sung Orr, and I've been a resident of Wilmette since 2012. I want to thank the members of the Administration Committee and the village staff for the thoughtful discussions over the last couple of months on the status of the Housing and Human Relations Commissions and the appointment and selection process of commissioners. I also want to express my appreciations to the members of the public who have provided comments throughout the process. The public discussions over the last 2 months is, I believe, an excellent example of democracy at work. Democracy works best when the business of the government is conducted with full transparency. The transparency requires the public to be informed about the process of how government operates, and that starts with the public having the knowledge and about the standards and protocol for the public to hold the government accountable. Regarding the appointment and selection process of the village commissioners, the village should take the proactive step in publishing the appointment process so that the process is readily accessible and understandable by the public. That is, the notice of the vacancies accurately reflecting open positions, the status of those vacancies, the qualifications for those positions, steps in volunteering information about how the steps in volunteering, information about how the appointment and selection process works, and a regular report from the village on the status of those vacancies and application pool. And I know I've seen discussions about this already, so I appreciate that. I'm just raising those points again. Further, I submit that for greater transparency, the consideration of volunteers for the commissions must involve more than the village president. Although the village statistics showed 100% of the nomination by the village president over the last 10 years have indeed been confirmed, it also leads to a perception that such appointments may be unfair or essentially a fait accompli. Especially when other vacancies have gone unfilled for years. To dispel such perceptions, the village should adopt an interim recommending body similar to Deerfield, Park Ridge, Lake Forest, and other municipalities. The village may want to consider a nominating committee of trustees to make recommendations to the village president, or this duty could be included as part of the responsibility of this administration committee. The village president will still retain the authority to appoint candidates. However, if the candidates are contrary to the recommendations, the public will have the knowledge of that, thus providing accountability and greater transparency. When residents of Wilmette volunteer to serve on the commission, everything should be done so that they feel that their offer to engage in the democratic process has been taken seriously. This will not only add value and credibility to the appointments, but to the ultimate work of those commissions. As we all know, sometimes perception is stronger than reality, and right now I submit that there exists a perception problem. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Peter, for your comments. Appreciate it. Okay, Cindy Fay?
Yes.
Thank you.
To the administrative committee, I'm a white resident of Wilmette, and I appreciate very much your careful consideration of the specific language of the mission statements and purposes of the Human Relations and Housing Commissions. Representation matters, language matters, and I ask the committee to reconsider the term minority when describing a segment of our population. Minority means less than, and when the term is used to refer to racial groups, it normalizes whiteness. The whiteness of our village is neither accidental nor benign. It's a result of decades of racist policy and white supremacist culture, including anti-Black parades, redlining policy that prevented Black families from obtaining mortgages and insurance, and deliberate real estate practices steering away Black residents and people of color. Wilmette's exclusionary culture and policy has been chronicled in part by former village president John Jacoby in the Wilmette Beacon. I am very hopeful the revived Human Relations and Housing Commissions can begin the needed work of equitable repair and healing. I ask you to replace the word minority with the term Black, Indigenous, and people of color, a language change which is more inclusive and which acknowledges the disproportionate oppression of our Black and Indigenous brothers and sisters have suffered. For the proposed Human Relations Commission purpose to promote justice and equality, I ask you to replace the term equality with equity, which recognizes that decades of discrimination are not repaired with the same treatment for all. Equality is an end goal, and the purposeful access and opportunities of equity is the means to get there. I also ask that you add the words including but not limited to, when listing the segments of our village population in order to be as inclusive and welcoming as possible. Thank you for considering these language changes and their implications. I encourage you to do so to work towards fulfilling the sentiment in the June 4th letter to the community from the Wilmette Board of Trustees. We need to reject racism in all its forms. Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate that and your comments. I do want to acknowledge that all of us on this committee did receive your email prior to this evening as well. And it is out for members of the community to receive as well, to see as well. So, but thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there, I'm going to assume, just going to check in with Alex one more time to see if anybody else had indicated who's on YouTube Live, excuse me, that would like to speak.
There was one comment on YouTube Live, and it was submitted from Karen Summer.
Okay.
I think she may have been tripped up, and she was curious as if this was going to be the only time to provide public comment.
Yes, for tonight's meeting, this would be the only time to provide public comment.
Okay, so Miss Summer commented, "I'd like to speak about additional recommendations for the selection process, which were sent earlier today." So if she is on this call, then hopefully she can provide her comment.
Yeah, and you know what, I might have spoken correctly there, so let me just clarify. This would be the only time to provide public comment on the topics that are on the agenda for this evening. The very end of the meeting, I will open it up to public comment on an item that potentially is not on the agenda, but anything related to the boards and commissions, the selection process and things like that, this is the only time to speak, correct? So yes, let's have her speak. It's Karen.
Yes, Karen Summer. I'm not sure if she's called in or if she's just on YouTube, but I have advised her on YouTube at least to provide her comment. So
Should we wait a few minutes?
And I'm sorry, Trustee Dodd, Alex, did she indicate she wanted to comment on the appointment and selection process?
I'd like to speak about additional recommendations for the selection process, which were sent earlier today. Yep.
Trustee Dodd, how about we start with the presentation, because that is the second component of our discussion tonight, so we can discuss the recommendations by the committee as she gets familiar with the process for commenting, and then before we start the appointment and selection process, we can let her make her comment.
Okay, perfect. Okay, that's great. So for those of you, Mike, then could you bring up the presentation again? So for those of you, hopefully, who are following along. So we will start with, let me just bring up my own slide. Hold on a minute. Just to clarify how we're going to go through this, we're going to first talk about the summary of recommendations concerning boards and commissions, kind of a recap of the things that we have already discussed. It's just there's a couple of things that we would like to address, and then we will move on to the appointment and selection process, which will be the most significant portion of the meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Brayman to kind of recap the recommendations to date.
All right, thank you, Trustee Dodd. Okay, so this is the committee's fourth meeting, and there's been a lot of important progress that's been made in the previous three. So the purpose of this slide is to summarize that progress. There's additional detail that's included in the agenda materials that provides the next layer of what's behind these recommendations on the larger ones. But we did want to confirm with the committee that this is what is going to be included in the final report to the village board. So the committee has discussed new functions of the Housing Commission, and those are listed in the agenda materials, and they're listed in a recommended order of priority, with the caveat that the Housing Commission, with the approval of the village board, could recommend moving some of those priorities around once they get together and begin their meetings. We have a new mission and purpose of the Human Relations Commission, and we are going to discuss that in greater detail on the next slide because there were changes made to that since the last meeting. We want to make sure that the committee is comfortable with those changes. And we also did discuss the initial function of the Human Relations Commission being a community engagement initiative and discussions on racism, social equity, and community building to really identify the needs of the community, and then come back to this administration committee and propose a 2-year work plan moving forward for the committee's work. We're also recommending to increase Housing Commission membership from its current 5 to 7, decrease membership on historic preservation from 9 to 7, and then include 2 students on the Human Relations Commission as part of the 9 members. This is a point I want to make sure that we clarify here. The Human Relations Commission, as it's currently stated in the code, has 9 members. It doesn't have a provision for any student members. So I just want to make sure whether we're thinking that these 2 student members that we'd like to move forward with, that they're going to be a part of the 9 and therefore full members with voting rights and part of the quorum, or if it's 7 Human Relations Commission members who are adults, plus 2 ex officio students. So if we can just get some direction from the committee on that to be sure we've got the proper recommendation to the board.
Mike, would you want us to speak to that at this time?
Yeah, I think that would be good to just address that right now.
All right, this is something that's been on my mind some, and because I'm concerned if we have 9 actual voting members, and I envision this of having 7 members for quorum purposes and for voting purposes, and 2 student members. I would anticipate that the schools would be the determinants of who those student members were, that there would be a different process for them joining the board, and that they likewise would have shorter terms rather than a 4-year terms, so that a larger number of students could participate and could contribute to the work of the commission. That's at least my thinking on it.
Yeah, and so Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm okay with it. I mean, I think this is consistent with what I've been saying. I think I like the 5 to 7. I think this is a good layout, a good plan.
So I guess, Peter, I can't recall, but I thought we said the reason why we wanted to have these students as voting members on this commission is that it makes them feel like they have a true seat at the table, that they really are part of this commission, and it makes them feel more accountable to attending these meetings and really being part of it. That's really my concern more than anything is, and I feel like we have a lot to learn from this community, from these students. I mean, and so whatever we can do to reinforce the importance that they have on this commission, I feel is important. Now, I don't know that means they have to have a voting right, but.
Well, I think, I mean, we've seen the, I believe it was the Loyola students that came in and really pushed and reinforced and did the research with the home over in, our affordable housing, and that's going to be developed by the artists. They did a lot of research and pushed that. I think both the Loyola New Trier kids did a phenomenal job advocating for this type of, and I think we've heard from the community. They want some of our younger population, and maybe it could be Loyola, New Trier, or even kids that graduate that are staying here locally and going to college here, but staying within I think give them a seat at the table.
Okay, I mean, you both of you make very good points. I do think that a student member should have a shorter term, though.
I would agree with you on that. I would agree.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think, whatever, and maybe the village can work with the schools to look through and say, maybe it's a sophomore to junior, and you have sort of you educate kids that are coming up and coming and have constant replacements, and it's a 2-year assignment.
2-year assignment or a 1-year assignment, whatever the detail is. But that would at least maximize the number of students that do get an opportunity to participate.
And so if we kept these students, so, I'm comfortable with, 2 years, I don't know. I partly why I think 2 years is good, at least to start, is, if you look at kind of what we're asking this commission to get started, we're thinking they're going to need, we want them to kind of really do some outreach to the community and come back in 2 years with a plan. So I'd sure like whoever is starting that to have an opportunity to kind of see that to the end. So my preference would be 2 years. If you're comfortable with that, Peter?
I am. Something short of 4. That was all.
Yeah.
Again, the objective is to have as many students as possible involved in the program.
And then are you so knowing that we would keep these two students and, or would have two students and we'd have two-year terms, are you comfortable with 9 members on this commission? Or were you proposing 7 with 2 being students?
But as I think of it, that would mean 5 non-students. And that actually, I think, is probably too small.
Okay.
And I would rather be perhaps too large and a bit unwieldy than too small. So then I'm absolutely comfortable with the 9.
Okay. So Mike, does that address your kind of open issues on
Yes.
particular?
Yep, that's helpful. That's very clear. And we'll work with the schools, if they feel 2 years is too long and 1 is better because it coincides with a certain coursework, we can bring that back to the board. That's an easy adjustment after the fact.
Okay.
This is probably a good time to mention, since we're talking about filling a number of vacancies to the Housing and Human Relations Commissions. The last time we had a new creation to create was back in 2010 with the Human Relations Commission, and we staggered those initial appointment terms so that they didn't all expire at the same time. So at that time, I believe it was 3 members appointed for a 3-year term, 3 members for a 2-year term, and 1 member for a one-year term. And I think we'd probably want to look at something similar so that we don't have all these terms coming up at the same time 3 years from now.
I like that suggestion.
And, all right, so I'm sorry. I think, I don't know if Trustee Barrow was going to say something, but I think what I was going to say is we can also tweak, if somebody gets a 1-year term, I don't think we would count that as a full term, in terms of their term limits. We could, somebody could serve 1 year, and then if they're inclined and they're, and a member that the board feels is adding good value, they could serve then 2 additional full terms. Because 1 year is a really short time frame, and I don't necessarily think that would be fair to somebody either.
Mike, are all the other boards and commissions likewise staggered?
They are all staggered, yes.
So will you be making a suggestion, Mike? So, of these, 7 members, some will have 1 year, some will have 2, some will have 3, some will have 4, or?
Yeah, I think based on what I looked at in the Village Code for Human Relations, 3 members would have a 3-year term, 3 members would have a 2-year term. That's 6 members, and then 1 member would have a 1-year term. That gets us to the 7.
Okay. And would you see then the 2-year term people as well, that we wouldn't count that as a term? Or just for the 1 year?
I think probably just for the 1 year.
Okay. Okay.
And that's something else too, we could also revisit as the commission gets working. Given the fact that they're going to spend 2 years building a work plan before they really get going, we may want to reevaluate that down the road.
Okay. Yeah, the challenging part of that is it just takes a while to gain the knowledge and the confidence to do this well. And it really was a shame that after a year, really after 2 years of somebody learning and contributing, when they're really kind of hitting their stride, that their term ends so prematurely.
Yeah, and I think the expectation would be that that individual would be reappointed as long as they're interested in continuing to serve. That's generally how our practice has worked and how the Human Relations Commission had worked when we had started it up back in 2010. So it just helps stagger it over time.
Good.
Okay, I think I have sufficient direction on that to roll that into the committee's recommendation to the board. And then the last 4 bullet points here, we've identified preferred backgrounds, experience, qualifications for all of our boards and commissions, which will be helpful as we talk about a more enhanced and robust communication plan regarding vacancies later in the evening. And more details are included in the agenda materials that were posted on the website. We'll be looking for annual reports from a number of our boards and commissions, including goals, and this would come to the Administration Committee and Village Board. We're going to be conducting training for all board members on a number of legal matters, as well as village policy documents such as the master plan, the zoning ordinance, and the like, and also enhancing recognition for our board and commission members who volunteer a significant amount of time to give back to the community. And then lastly, we had talked about this at our last meeting, which is to include a broad statement of the village's goal to fill our boards and commissions with a diverse mix of residents, and putting that statement on our village website and as well as on our TBQ form, so it's prominent and clear what our goals are moving forward.
Yep.
So that's total.
A great list.
It's a lot. When you look in the packet, especially when we look at the Housing Commission and Human Relations Commission, they're really going to have some meaty projects to work on over the next few years, and it's very exciting.
Yep.
So digging a little bit further into the Human Relations Commission mission and purpose. At the last meeting, we had presented a draft narrative mission statement, and based on discussions at the meeting, we had amended that again to address the fact that the commission is presenting and making recommendations to the board and staff before they move forward with their initiatives. And Trustee Dodd, I know you wanted to discuss this a little bit further, and we had looked at the Environment and Energy Commission in the Village Code, which has some slightly different language than what we had proposed based on last meeting's discussion. So I put that on this slide here for reference purposes.
Okay. Yeah, so let me chime in here, Mike, thank you. So I guess I realize that obviously all of our commissions, are there to support the board and act on behalf of the board. In my mind, this Human Relations Commission, for them to be presenting to the village board their recommendations really puts the responsibility on the village board then to be the ones fostering and promoting an inclusive community, doing all these things. And I actually think it isn't just the village board. It should be the human relations and actually everybody within our community. So I'm actually not entirely comfortable with that language. And what I was proposing that we do is instead change it to say consistent to kind of what we've done with the EEC, because I think they've been a really model for us in terms of really digging into the environmental and energy issues, making, making suggestions and really actually really leading that effort for the board. And I think that that's something that the Human Relations Commission can be doing as well, is really leading this effort for us in terms of what we need to be doing. And so what I would like us to say is instead of, shall present to the village board or whatever, I would like it to read, consistent with, the Human Relations Commission shall be an advisory body to the board. And its purpose is to foster and promote an inclusive community. So I'm basically suggesting we get rid of, the shall present to the village board and the village and set, and just state that they're an advisory commission whose purpose is to foster and promote an inclusive community. And I wanted to reach out to, I wonder how you guys feel about that. It's a minor change, but I believe it's an important one.
What happens when the village board doesn't agree with the recommendations from the Human Relations Commission?
Then the village board will go, then they'll be presenting their suggestions and we'll go back to them. And that's why it's an advisory body. I don't see that as, I don't see that as an issue.
I don't necessarily agree comparing human relations to the Environmental Commission. I think those are two different paths. So I think you open up the community for a lot of potential angst if the village board goes against it. Again, maybe it doesn't, and maybe it's all, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate. But I think, this is a very emotional topic for the community that, if and could be polarizing versus, I think, in environmental. I think, most of everything that we have seen, we all agree that, hey, we want to, I don't want to, and again, I don't want to, I'm just playing devil's advocate. I think, we have to be very careful of pitting commissions against the village board and opening a window there.
I follow what Dan is saying, but I don't see that language change necessarily follows from that language change. We are preserving the concept that what they do say to the board is advisory. I mean, we know that, and the language says that straight away. And I don't know that the concern, Dan, that you raise arises from the change in the language. I think that
No,
that
I
might,
think it goes into the mandate. Again, we
Mhm.
overturn the zoning board all the time, and
right.
they're advisory.
Mm-hmm.
No emotions step out of it. If the Human Relations Commission, we're going to charge the Human Relations Commission with setting a lot of more social objectives, which again might not be consistent with where the village, and that's up for debate. So I just think, you know, we have to be very careful of what the role of this commission does, and where it follows the strategy of the village board. So.
But we are going to be asking them to do things within the community to foster and promote an inclusive environment. We are going to be asking them, if you look at some of the things to do, we're not asking them just to present to the board. We are asking them to do some of these things, which is why I'm proposing a slightly different set of language.
Yeah, I think.
And so, Dan, I can't tell from your, are you opposed to the suggestion, or are you just raising a concern?
Well, I think we're trying to mince word. I mean, I think we're all on the same page of what we think, you know, the Human Relations Commission should be. And I think it's important for us what the role of this commission is going to be is a group of volunteers that will help do the research that we're hearing as village board members. As I've said early on, I think it's very important that this one does not become advocacy groups. You know, that's really not what this is. This is going to actually listen to the various advocacy groups that are formed within the community and find ways that people identify things, important issues, and how do they elevate it? How do we take what's right and make some changes and recommend that to the village board for discussion, review, approval. And the village board may say, you know what, we're not going to do this, or we are going to do this.
Mr. Freeman, can I ask you a question related to this?
Yes.
That might help us. So and I don't have it in front of me, and I'm sure I'm not asking you to know this off the top of your head, but, you know, obviously, what are the mission statements? How, you know, do we generally, specify, that their goal is to present to the board, or do we generally, I mean, in my mind, and this is where, you know, in my mind, a mission statement is kind of what we're asking them to do, to accomplish. And so is that, I'm trying to think of, the transportation, I'm just trying to think of if we could, obviously, Dan doesn't feel it's necessarily a good reference to the EEC. I believe it is more just in terms of the language, but I guess I'm asking you to give some background to some of the other mission statements in our, and I know that's kind of putting you on the spot with something.
Sure, yeah, I'll pull that up in a second. As you were, I thought you were going to ask me about the mission statements in other communities for these commissions, so I did pull that up.
Yeah,
and
our case,
this will help us muddy the waters more. So Highland Park, they provide advisory recommendations to the, that's their duty and responsibility, to provide advisory recommendations, where in Northbrook, they shall act in an advisory capacity. So I think you've got a little bit of both in each. I kind of just stepping back on the EEC, and most recently, the EEC is working on the Greenest Region Compact right now. But remember that work was assigned to them by the village board, right? We brought that to the administration committee and then to the village board, and then asked the EEC to do that work. I think the way we're starting with the Human Relations Commission is similar in that the commission is going to put together that 2-year work plan and then bring it back to the committee and the board for review and direction. And when I was reviewing minutes from Highland Park Human Relations Commission meeting earlier in this process, they did have discussion about bringing a recommendation to their city council. So I guess what I'm saying is Highland Park and Northbrook have language similar to each of these, but I think they operate in a similar manner, and our EEC does. So I'm not sure it makes a big difference, because our practice has been that the village board is kind of directing that overall policy, right? The commissions work within that policy and do that work. So I think it could go either way. I can pull up the
No, that's okay.
some of our other commissions. It won't take me very long.
And I agree with, how Mr. Brayman just said that. I mean, which is, if the village board is giving the Human Relations Commission projects to work on, and very similar to how we do the Environmental Commission, and say, you know what, this is something that we have heard from residents that we'd like to explore. You go back and research and advise. That I agree that we're doing. As long as it doesn't open the door for the Human Relations Commission to say, you know what, there's something that we want to form and present that to the group, or advise the group or the board and say, we want you to do this without the village board knowing or asking to be mandated. That's not,
but we're not giving the Human Relations Commission a direct, we're not saying do this, and this, because, we don't feel that's the whole reason why we're creating this Human Relations Commission, is we're trying to broaden. We don't maybe have the best perspective. That's why we're putting a variety of racial, ethnic, and gender, religious people on that commission. And their first steps are actually going to be going out to the community, doing some education, doing what we're seeing in some of these other communities, and kind of figuring out what they think is what they believe are their recommendations. We don't know yet what to be doing.
No, but I agree. But that's why I say it's different than the environmental. If you just heard what Mike said, he said the village board gave the Environmental Commission to go be part of the greenest region. So what you're saying is different. You want the Human Relations Commission to go out and find opportunities that we should do this, and that I think that makes the commission, that gives the commission a lot of power that can go against what might be right for the village or the village board.
Not if it's stated as they're an advisory body to the board.
I'm just saying, I know, I'm just saying, but if we unleash that then creates a political forum.
I just don't see it that way, but
that's fine. That's why we can agree to disagree.
If I can add a couple additional items. So I pulled up our Housing Commission purpose, which we're actually through this process not amending, but existing in the code now. The purpose of the Housing Commission is to present to the President and Board of Trustees recommendations for, and then it lists, alleviation of, shortage of decent, safe, and affordable housing and the like. And then they shall periodically review and update its recommendations to the board. So that's probably more consistent with the top language on our slide, but then the EEC has different language. So we have it both ways in our code. The other communities have it both ways. The process we're talking about, if we go back one slide, see if I can go backwards, or two slides. We had talked about preparing annual reports, including goals for the next year for these commissions that would come to the village board. So there is that oversight in terms of direction on what their upcoming projects and tasks are going to be on an annual basis. So no matter the language we select, there is going to be that check and balance based on that requirement to present those goals to the board.
So I guess, Peter, obviously Dan and I have a difference of opinion here. I don't know. You've heard both things. I'm not trying to put you on the spot here. I mean, we could just leave the language as is. And then if we want to have a discussion at the village board level, or, maybe this is just maybe I'm just nitpicking the words, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I do agree that this commission, the Human Relations Commission, we do anticipate that they will be at least at some time and to some extent operating a little bit differently than our other boards and commissions, and that's because this is a new area. This is a new ground for us. This has not been a commission that's been active, we all know, for a long time, and there's a lot of work to do, and we don't exactly know how it's going to shake out over the next several years. We have tasks in mind, but they may come back with variations on that, with different things that, having spoken with the community, that they would like to follow up on. It will then be the board's decision to say yay or nay or something in between. And that's why trustees are elected at the end of the day, is to make those kinds of difficult decisions. So I'm comfortable, Kathy, with the change to the language that you've suggested, because at the end of the day, I think the responsibility for whatever is recommended will be that of the board, and they'll get they'll get the praise or the blame, and that's why people are elected to be trustees. So I'm comfortable with the change, recognizing that they may be coming back and thinking about things that we don't anticipate today.
Okay. So, maybe as a,
I mean, as a thought, I mean, it's not uncommon when committees have reports and the like, that there's a sense of majority and a minority kind of opinion, and maybe some notation for the board's larger discussion, raising the points that Dan has raised. Maybe that's the appropriate way to handle this.
Yeah. Kathy, it's not, we don't always have to agree. I mean, I think
I know,
the
that's
disagreeing's fine. And look at it. I think in this case, unlike some of the others, especially the ones that you have the comparison, this topic there are already a lot of groups that are formed across the village that have opinions on this in varying different ways, that some people support, some don't. So, and I think this commission is going to, in my opinion, it's going to be the ones that take all of those different ideas, synthesize it, and report to the village board to make the decision. It is not an extension of another political commission or political platform.
Nor am I proposing that, Dan. Nor am I proposing that. I'd like us to change the language, because it sounds like Peter supports that. In the report, if you'd like Mr. Brayman to specify that there was some discussion among the board, among this commission, of whether that language, you can provide the other language if you'd like, but that, this is what the, that's the language I would like us to see then, given that we have two of us here. We don't always have to agree. So, and are you comfortable with that, Mr. Brayman?
Yes, we'll do that. And with the report, we're also going to include the minutes of the committee's meetings. For this meeting, there'll be draft minutes because we won't have another meeting to approve. So there'll also be reference to the discussions that the other board members can refer to.
And then do you have a slide with the purpose of the HRC?
Yes.
So maybe, so then the second thing was, and maybe we don't make this change, which was, this is the purpose. And do we want to keep the language that says to make recommendations to the village board regarding the following? And maybe so that we ensure that it is showing that it's a advisory board, we could keep that language. I was actually proposing we don't need to keep that language, but I'm sensing from you, Dan, that maybe you'd feel more comfortable with that. And so that way that purpose is an additional, it's identifying, you know, it's reinforcing that this is an advisory board. I don't like in the housing commission that we agreed on. I'd have to go back and look at that for a minute. Hold on. I'm just looking at something. Hold on a second. I mean, are you guys comfortable with what's listed here on this page in terms of that it's that of all these things that say make recommendations to the village board regarding the following?
Yeah, absolutely comfortable, Kathy.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
I don't think there should be an issue here.
Okay. Okay, fine. Then let's keep that as is.
All right, and Trustee Dodd, this is where Cindy Fay had some suggestions on the language. You know, I think her suggestions are very well taken, and you know, I'd like to take some time to review them with people who have a little bit more expertise in crafting this type of language than you know I do. So if the committee's comfortable, you know, we can work on that and review that prior to you know making the report to the village board and kind of determine what the appropriate language would be moving forward.
I think that's perfect. Yep. So, and then obviously Cindy can see that in our final information stuff. So that's great. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
That's it for the recommendations to the board. I know before we got into the appointment selection, we had one more public comment, which I think Alex said was submitted now. And I don't know if that was something he's reading or it's a verbal comment.
It was a comment on YouTube Live, which I can read. Okay, and this comment was made by Karen Summer. It seems to me that the processes outlined in this slide are largely the same as they have been in the past. The recommendations, in my opinion, do not address the many concerns expressed regarding the lack of transparency and the perceived cronyism that characterizes the current recruitment and selection process. To achieve greater diversity and equity on the village's commissions will require a significant effort to cast a wide net with regard to recruitment, including advertising and announcing openings. And that was the comment.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay. So we Trustee Dodd, would you like me to go through these slides here?
I would, please.
Okay. So we're looking at this appointment and selection process in kind of several different ways. The first is knowing that we need to improve communicate. I'm sorry, I think I skipped a slide actually.
I was just going to ask that. Okay.
There we go. The first is we know we need to do a better job of promoting these positions that to the community, and especially promoting vacancies when they're upcoming, so that residents know what vacancies are coming months in advance, as well as the skill sets we're looking for based on what the direction is in the village code for those preferred qualifications. So when we're working with our communications team, Metro Strategies, when we'll implement a robust recruitment program for all of our upcoming vacancies moving forward, we're going to identify key messaging to welcome and encourage applications. We'll create videos. We're certainly going to improve content on our website. There's a big opportunity there to improve the content and the transparency. And we're going to be making sure that all these vacancies are publicized in advance so that everybody has an opportunity to consider them. And we really want to start these outreach efforts as soon as we get to the village board for our review, because we know we want to move expeditiously to fill spots on the Housing and Human Relations Commission as quickly as we can. That will take some time because we do want to make sure we get the word out and we give residents an opportunity to consider submitting a TBQ, submit the TBQ, and then go through the actual selection process. So it's not going to happen overnight, but we have a good plan in place to move forward as quickly as we can.
Hey, Mike, while you're on that subject, when you speak about improving content, I envision one of the problems that we have, the large problem, I think, is a lack of appreciation, a lack of understanding on the part of residents generally about what vacancies there are on our boards and commissions. And I think it would be very helpful if somewhere prominently on the website, maybe under the boards and commissions tab, it immediately opened with some kind of a listing, maybe commission by commission, showing the names of the people that were on it, the length of their terms and when they were appointed, so that people could understand that, for example, they were interested in joining the zoning board, but if they were to go to that site, they would see that there currently isn't a vacancy on the zoning board, and there might not be one unless someone were to leave for whatever the reason, might not be for a year or two or whatever, that they still might and still would be encouraged, I hope, to file their questionnaire. But at least they would have an understanding about what the current state of board and commission membership was at that time. And that kind of information would also be useful, and I may be one slide ahead, for people that actually send in a questionnaire. When we respond to them, we should be able to say, thank you for applying to this or that. There currently isn't a vacancy. However, we'll keep your application and keep it and review it so that the person actually knows the status of their application. And I think both of those things would go a long way to improving our transparency and our communication, so that people don't think that they sent in an application and it just disappears without having a knowledge of what the actual state of openings and vacancies are.
Yes, we can absolutely do that, and will, in terms of updating the website. And I'm looking at it right now as we speak, and it certainly, there's room for improvement to enhance that communication and transparency and just consistency amongst our different pages for our boards and commissions. And to Mr. Orr's point earlier in the evening, we certainly should better explain the appointment and selection process on here, so that individuals who are interested in submitting a TBQ understand what to expect moving forward. So we'll update that as well. And then Trustee Barrow, you had kind of moved on to a little bit about communication.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Before you go on to that, I agree with Peter's points, but there's one other thing I wanted to say in terms of this communication, which I think is going to be, clearly we recognize that this is something we need to improve on, and Peter spoke to this, and others in past meetings have spoke to it. Another thing that's come up, and so this is just something for the communications team to be thinking about. So it's often come up that, how do people, so obviously we tell people in order to be interested, you need to submit a talent bank questionnaire. But the question has come up to me a couple times of, I have a friend who I think might be interested. And so if somebody, we might be doing this as board members, which has created some concern that the way that people get on these commissions is a village board member encourages them to sign up. But I think we want all residents in the community to be encouraging people to sign up. And we want to make sure, so maybe this could have something like, around, nominate a friend. Here's also what you do, or something. Nominate's not the right word. Sorry. I don't like that, but have a friend interested, maybe we could figure out, they should then reach out to one of us on the administration committee to explain to them, then you would submit a talent bank questionnaire, or just something so that if somebody has somebody they think would be a great candidate, there's a mechanism for them to make that suggestion.
That's a good point. And, an idea that comes to mind now as I was looking at some websites and other communities on their boards and commissions is that they provide contact information for the staff liaison of each board and commission on the website. And that would be a really good person for somebody who's interested but not sure to reach out to the staff, talk to them a little bit more about what the commission does, what it entails to volunteer, and the time commitments. Because as I look at our pages now, we do not have that type of contact information. And I think that could really help somebody who's interested but not entirely sure, whether they want to make a submittal.
But this could also be, I like that suggestion. This could also be somebody who, so I'll just, me, yeah, assuming I'm not a trustee right now, oh gosh, I think my neighbor would be really good. So what do I do with that information? You know what I mean? And so just, again, it's not, the person might not even be thinking that they'd be good at it because they're not as engaged or involved as maybe the other person who is. So it's slightly different. It's somebody saying, I have a friend who I think would be good. Who should I talk to about that?
Yeah, I think that's pretty open-ended. I think, if that individual is comfortable, talking to the village president, that's great. If talking to another trustee, that's always helpful too, because that trustee could speak with the village president and then reach out to the individual. Or, they can contact me as the village manager, and I can provide additional information on the process, and as well as some contact information. So I think there's several different avenues that people can go to help kind of bring that individual forward.
And Mike, just to finish with that, that's exactly the kind of thing that we ought to be telling people. We ought to, we all know how it operates because, well, we're trustees.
Right.
But a lot of people aren't. And we ought to make this really clear, and we ought to make it really easy. And of course, right now it isn't. And it really isn't hard to make this clear and easy.
Yep, absolutely agreed. And we will, that's something we can get working on pretty quickly. Okay, so I will move on to the next slide here. So the second component of the appointment selection process is communication with applicants who've submitted a TBQ. I think we've heard pretty clearly that we need to do a better job of this, and we will moving forward. So, our past practice, for as long as I can remember, is to send a form letter to the individual, thanking them for the application and letting them know someone may be in touch. I think a more personal touch is needed and appropriate in this circumstance. So we will ensure that a village representative personally follows up with each individual who submits a TBQ. That representative may vary from time to time. It could be myself, it could be the staff liaison, it could be the village president. It may just depend. But that's a really good opportunity for us to provide that individual with more information about the boards and commissions they're interested in, links to the commission website, to recent agenda materials, also let them know whether or not there's any vacancies. Because I think a point we discussed earlier is we get a lot of TBQs for boards and commissions that don't have any vacancies. It may not for a year or two, and a resident doesn't necessarily know that. So we want to more clearly communicate that when somebody submits to us. And that also gives them an opportunity to maybe reevaluate which boards and commissions they want to be interested in if they want to serve more quickly. And then I think this is going to be really important and helpful is to conduct an annual review of talent bank questionnaires we have on file. And every year touching base with the residents who submitted TBQs to confirm they continue to want to seek appointment, determine whether they want to expand their areas of interest or change their areas of interest, and also provides them an opportunity to update their TBQ and resume. Right now, sometimes, we'll look at a TBQ that's 3 or 4 years old and interview and appoint that individual. But clearly, things may have changed in their personal or professional life that, impact, their qualifications, for that commission or maybe make them impactful on a different commission. And we don't know that information because it gets a little bit stale. So we'll be doing these annual reviews and updates. And I think that'll really help people feel more engaged with the process and know that we are, we really are seeking out, their service and wanting to make sure that they're being considered. So if there's no comments on that, I will move to the next slide here. So at our last meeting, we had initiated discussions on the actual appointment and selection process. We had a presentation from our corporation counsel regarding the legal aspects of that. Very clear that the recommendation of the appointment rests with the village president, and then the approval, which we call the advice and consent, lies with the village board. And then we also did discuss the processes in nearby communities. One item that came out of that last meeting was the committee being interested in a regular report or a dashboard to the village board, which would be placed on a board agenda that provides the status of the boards and commissions, our current membership information, term expirations, current number of current vacancies, the forecast of upcoming vacancies. And I think that'll really be helpful in making sure that we are all at the village staying on top of our appointments and our boards and commissions, and having solid groups of commissions that are fully staffed on a regular basis. At the same time, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mike. You finish, and then I have a question.
Yeah, actually, go ahead. Mine was more of a transition into the next slide.
Well, what's your thinking then on how frequently, that wouldn't be a consent item, presumably. That would be something that is formally discussed at our meetings. And how frequently would you anticipate that this information would be provided? Is that quarterly or semi-annually or something else?
Yeah, I think my initial thinking was quarterly, and we can always scale that up or down if it's not meeting our expectations. And we can always scale the actual contents of the report up or down, depending on our needs as well. I had actually envisioned it being on the consent agenda, but it's certainly something we can have off or be pulled off if discussion is required. But we will, yeah, that's something we can work through later on. But quarterly, I think, is a good starting point for that.
I agree with that. I agree with that, and I don't think it should be on consent. I do think it's something that we want to specifically call out, and so that anyone that is watching or listening at least has a better likelihood of being engaged with it.
Yeah, so that's interesting, Peter. I mean, I would have said that it would, if we were doing it quarterly, maybe it would, that it would go on consent. And then as there's a topic that's important for the board, it would easily, it would be, it'd be available to discuss as a board. I mean, I think we just have to kind of first see how this report plays out and things like that. So maybe the first time we present it to the board, it would be really nice for us to have that presented to the board, see what things they'd like, you know what I mean? And I mean, I would like to add to here, what I was going to say is, in addition to what's listed here, I think it would be nice to have a recap of the talent bank questionnaires that have been submitted, not necessarily the names, but just the number of talent bank questionnaires that have been submitted, for what commissions and things like that. Again, that's just going to help us understand, if we have a lot of members who are continuing to submit requests for the talent bank questionnaires and we're not able to get them on a commission for a number of years, we might just have to look at that a little bit as this committee to see if there's something else we could be doing to engage these people. So I think that would be helpful. But so anyways, Peter, how would you feel about just saying, initially, why don't we put it off consent, and then once we feel like we're in a groove, maybe then it's just once every 6 months or once every year we have a recap.
And so you're thinking it would or would not be?
Initially, it would be off consent, especially the first time we present this report, so that the board could see it and understand what we're doing. And then once we get feedback from the board, then we can make a decision of how often we want to discuss this. I mean, we're going to do a lot of communication. I think we have to recognize that we're doing a lot of changes, right? We're gonna be improving our website. We're gonna be doing more communication about vacancies. We're gonna be touching out to members who are submitting a TBQ. There's gonna be hopefully a lot of things. It's gonna look, I'm hopeful, it's gonna look different in 6 months how this whole process is playing out.
I absolutely agree. It will be different and far better. But I think this is one of the ways that we really effect the kind of communication and transparency.
Yeah.
So
that's fair.
I'm not a big fan of moving it to consent unless it really becomes something that's pretty rote. At least initially, I would say perhaps for the first year, since we're only speaking quarterly, I'd like to see it part of our formal agenda.
Okay.
Okay, very good. We can do that. All right, anything else before I go into the next slide, which is the new slide we had added earlier this morning? So I wanted to provide more of a framework for our discussion on the actual appointment and selection process and how it's going to look moving forward. At our last meeting, we dived into more detail on what our neighboring communities do, and we are certainly in that majority in terms of the village president really being the sole touch point on those appointments and making those recommendations to the village board. On the other end of the spectrum are the, as we had heard earlier, the Deerfields and the Park Ridges that do, robust public meeting processes and interviews for their candidates and public deliberations. And I believe the sense from the committee was that was maybe a little bit too much to subject a resident to that type of public process, especially as we're trying to increase the number of volunteers. So, what we're trying to lay out here as a framework is kind of a sweet spot in between, which I kind of look at as the Glencoe or the Lincolnshire approach. They were the two communities that didn't solely rely on the village president making those recommendations on their own, but didn't have that full-throated public deliberation and forum. So, in terms of, and we're separating this out, I think, important into two discussions. One is just ongoing appointments to all of our boards and commissions. And I think we have a unique circumstance with Housing and Human Relations having to fill 14 positions at once. And that, I think, requires a little bit of a different process given the circumstance. So first, for ongoing appointments, I'm going to highlight the things here that we're laying out that would be different from what we're doing now. The first is communicating the vacancy to the community. We just, other than putting them on our agendas right now, we don't do that very well. So, we will be transparently seeking out more interested volunteers through our e-news or through our communicator or our social media, so that residents have an opportunity to apply before a selection is made. And then the village president and staff reviewing upcoming vacancies and TBQs. This is something we already do to be on top of it. And then the village president discussing the needs of the board or commission with staff. And we've added and/or the committee chair here. The practice has been generally to discuss it with staff. There's a lot of value in adding the committee chair to that discussion on what the needs of the committee are and the type of skill set that would be helpful moving forward. So that's a recommendation the committee could consider. The village president does already interview the candidate or candidates in person, and that certainly would continue. A new component here would be the submission of the village president's recommendation to the village board in advance of placing the individual on the agenda. And the purpose of this is really to give village trustee, it's another set of eyes on the selected candidate before it becomes public. And it gives trustees an opportunity to express any concerns or reservations they have to the village president without potentially embarrassing a candidate publicly. And that's something that some of the other communities we looked at do. And that is a pretty significant change in our process, in that there is now would be more input on that candidate prior to making that recommendation in a public meeting. And then, as we currently do, we introduce the candidate to the public at a village board meeting prior to their appointment, where the candidate would explain their qualifications, explain their history in Wilmette, and why they're interested in serving. And then I'll talk about the ongoing process, and the additional process for Housing and Human Relations, and we can come back to a discussion. So as I mentioned, the Housing and Human Relations, this is really unique. We're talking about 14 or 15 appointments all at one time, which is pretty much on par with the number of appointments the village president generally makes in a single year. So this is different. And I think as such, really does require a different process. So what we're looking at doing or laying out as a framework here for the committee to recommend to the full village board and the village president to consider is that the village president identify who he is going to select as the committee chair. As the code is written, the village president selects the committee chair. That doesn't require approval of the board. And then the village president would work and collaborate with the chair on the remaining appointments. And that really provides an important second set of eyes when we have this many individuals coming forward at once, The chair would review the TBQs the president is looking at, would have the opportunity to talk to those applicants if they're so inclined. We'd also include the staff in this review process as well. That's kind of like the Glencoe approach, where the staff liaison or the manager, as well as the chair of the committee, see the TBQ and have the opportunity to talk to the candidate and provide some feedback to the village president before they submit the recommendations. And especially when it comes to something like the Housing Commission, in terms of collaboration and looking for, the right people, I think it would be appropriate for the village president to also reach out to organizations like HODC and SEPA, who know a lot of residents in our community who have either affordable housing expertise or financing expertise for affordable projects or development expertise. And they may have some candidates that they suggest we look at and consider for these commissions. So really making this a process where there's multiple touch points and multiple individuals who can provide some feedback to the village president before he submits his recommendations. And then once the village president has determined who he is going to recommend for appointments, there could be a memorandum submitted to the village board that summarizes each of the candidates, their backgrounds and their qualifications, and distribute that prior to posting the agenda, which would give all 7 board members an opportunity to review the candidates under consideration and provide feedback or express any concerns about those candidates prior to putting this on the village board agenda. And then lastly, taking that memorandum or a similar memorandum and making that part of the public agenda materials so that the community understands the qualifications those individuals have, essentially why they've been selected to serve on those boards and commissions. And that's a pretty substantial change from what we do now. Of course, we do already include the TBQ in the resume for every candidate that's being recommended, but it doesn't necessarily, identify exactly why the village president has selected that individual. And I think this would be helpful not only to the board, but to the community, as well as to applicants who may not have been selected to understand the qualifications of those who have been. So these are just ideas. It's a framework for the committee to have their discussions tonight.
Okay, great. So first of all, Mike, thank you. And thank you for putting this slide together, because I do think it's going to really help guide the discussions. And, this is based on obviously lots of feedback that we've received from members of the community. I think a lot of these things are consistent with what we heard from a couple of people who spoke tonight, as well as, discussions that I've had with our president and with a couple of members of the community. So, I'd like to start by just let's start with the ongoing appointments, because that's, in terms of, Peter and Dan, what's your overall reaction to these kind of outlining these kind of 6 steps in this process? Obviously, the significant changes are obviously the communication of the vacancy, really encouraging the village president to be working with the committee chair in terms of needs and recommendations. And then and then the submission of the recommendation to the village board in advance of the public notice. There's been some discussions about advise and consent and what that means, and I think we ultimately want to be very sensitive to, we want candidates to, we want people to want to be on these boards and commissions. So we want the process of getting selected to be positive. If it's not positive, then we won't have additional people doing it. So I think this is trying to find the right mix between, I think what we said we were comfortable with was some of the more formal interviewing by more than just the president, but not just allowing some additional transparency points, as well as another set of eyes to review this. So what's your guys' reaction to this?
Well, I guess a couple of things, a couple of thoughts. First, putting aside the Housing and Human Relations Commissions in their current state, because that is going to change and radically change. But thinking of the other boards and commissions, I think that our process has generally worked very well. It's worked very well, certainly in the sense that it has created boards and commissions of dedicated, hardworking, thoughtful people that serve as an initial touch point for village residents when they have a zoning matter or a transportation matter. And it's worked very well in advising and making recommendations to the board for the board's final decisions. So I think the process has generally worked exceedingly well. And in terms of creating village government, for that reason, I'm not in favor of large global changes to it. I do agree, Kathy, that we really don't want to make our volunteers enter the star chamber in order to serve on a board or commission. We want to make it welcoming and encouraging. I've served on 2 over the years, and I am familiar with the process. But we want to make it easy and welcoming. We don't want to make it onerous, and we certainly don't want to make it, really embarrassing in any sense. I do question, though, why, looking at the 3rd bullet point on the top, why isn't it that the village president should always be in conversation with the staff? And it seems to me should always be in conversation with the chair of that committee about possible people to join that committee. That should be something that's included at every turn, whether it's for one of these new commissions that we're staffing up or one of our existing ones. That seems to me something that we ought to be doing all the time. What I find attractive about the suggestions for the Housing and Human Relations Commission is that we are building in more transparency. We are setting forth reasons why. And we don't really do that for the ongoing appointments. That information is perhaps being given to the village board, but it's not really being communicated to the public. And better communication to our residents, I think, is something that we're really trying to achieve here. And I don't know that the changes to the ongoing appointment process really go far enough so that there's a more fuller understanding of why someone was selected.
So I want to make sure I understand your point here. Okay. So, I mean, are you proposing, so are you just asking for more clarity once the person has been selected, more communication to the community around the qualifications they have and why, specifically to the ongoing process?
2 things. I'm suggesting that rather than as necessary in the 3rd bullet point, that formal engagement by the president of the staff and the committee chair should be part of every potential appointment.
Okay, yes, I don't disagree with you. So you're just suggesting we remove that word as necessary, maybe clarify that language. Okay. Yeah.
I'm actually surprised that isn't the case currently, but whatever. Yeah. But I would like to see in some forum, and perhaps it's at the time of the introduction of the candidate, that the village president then would set forth all of the reasons why that person, rather than simply have them come forward and state their background and why they're interested, have a more formal presentation by the president as to why that person, among others, was selected to be recommended.
Okay. And Mike, actually, can you clarify for us, because this is something I want to acknowledge I might have not been clear to to the community as well as to this committee. So in terms of the introduction of the candidate to the public at the village board meeting, there was some confusion because the recommendation to appoint the person is on the consent agenda, but the actual introduction of the candidate is not on the consent agenda. Correct?
Correct. So,
okay, and those are two different things. One is just that they're being recommended, and so obvious then for approval, and then assuming that's on the consent agenda, then we can formally, and we approve it, we can formally introduce this candidate to the public.
yeah, so we ask every candidate that's going to be appointed to come to a board meeting to introduce themselves to the board and the community prior to their appointment. Obviously, with schedules, we try to get that individual to come when that item is on the agenda as recommendation. So which gives, that 2-week opportunity if the board wanted to consider that individual's qualifications or comments prior to voting on it. That's our preferred route and generally the way it works. So when that recommendation is made, that recommendation is usually under report of officers and not on consent if that individual can attend the meeting. If they cannot attend the meeting, it would go on consent. And then if they are attending the next meeting, their introduction or, to the board would be off consent. Their appointment would be where the board votes is on consent.
Okay.
So one way or another, the expectation is that the candidate does come and speak to the board at a public meeting as part of the appointment process.
Okay. So I think what Peter's proposing is where it reads introduction of candidate to the public at the village board meeting. I think what he's saying is, maybe it's an introduction by the president of the qualifications and the rationale for nominating them, and that as well as then so maybe it's a two-step thing, and then there's a introduction of the candidate where they're speaking themselves. I think he's proposing, correct, Peter?
That's absolutely right.
He's proposing two things. One, that the village president provides a little more public background on this person and their experience, the diverse ideas they might bring, whatever are the things, the qualifications and the skill set that the chair actually and the president felt were important in this person. And then we allow the candidate to introduce themselves. So maybe we specify those as two separate processes, two separate steps in the process. And are you, and I don't know.
I think that, just so I can clarify when I'm preparing, the recommendations and the summary to the board, Trustee Barrow, I think what I heard was, some type of written memorandum or explanation that would accompany the agenda item, the TBQ as well, similar to what we had discussed on the bottom half of the slide for the Housing and Human Relations. And it doesn't have to be, a 2-page single-space memorandum. It could be, just a paragraph that would summarize, maybe the commission's needs, the skill set of the individual, and their qualifications.
Yeah, Mike, I think that would be terrific. That would go a long way to helping folks understand why a particular person was being nominated for the position. And, as part of the introduction by the president, that presumably would be summarized, repeated to some extent. So yes, I think a formal written as well as a statement as part of the president's presentation. I think both of those are exactly what I'm thinking about.
And Dan, I just want to give Dan an opportunity. Do you have any thoughts or reactions to that?
No, I think how you laid it out, I think our process is very good. I don't think it's broken. I think, more disclosures, and it's going to come in the dashboard that we've created. And I would challenge that the administration committee, for whatever the makeup is, should be discussing this. And, you're going to have more clarity to openings. And then it's our job as trustees to challenge the president. Why are there vacancies? And, admittedly, I think everyone that I've approved, there has been that 2-step process. It might not be in written form, but, and I think about the ones that we've appointed to the zoning board, it shame on us if we don't ask why the president is recommending this person to be a zoning board only because they've been an architect for the last 30 years and they're experienced in this. And maybe we assume, so maybe if it helps that he writes it out that this person's a 30-year architect and would be a great addition, if it helps in written form, fine. So, but I think this is fine.
Okay. Okay. And so then the other thing I think, Mike, that just to make sure you caught was just removing that, maybe rephrasing that as necessary. Village president discusses needs with staff and committee chair.
Yes, I've got that in my notes. We will make sure to make that change.
Okay. And then, and then in terms of the unique situation we have for the upcoming Housing and Human Relations Commission. Obviously, Mike, you clarified a couple things. Some of the things you mentioned in terms of the way the president's going to work with the committee chairs is slightly different than kind of what's outlined here. I mean, you've got it, but I think it looks like the committee chair will be really more of a plain and active role in terms of helping to select those candidates. Is that true?
Yeah, I think, the village president would be bringing, the TBQs that he identifies as, being, what he thinks are the best candidates to that chair, have the chair review them, give the chair the opportunity to talk to those individuals, and then provide feedback to the village president based on those TBQs and resumes.
Yeah, I think that's, I'm comfortable with that. Dan and Peter?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yep.
So, I mean, I would concur with the comments that Dan and Peter made. So, which is, clearly, our boards and commissions have, been filled with very talented and competent people. And we're very, very lucky for everybody who does participate and volunteer their time. So I want to acknowledge and thank everybody who's doing that. I think what we're really trying to do here is just improve, obviously, the transparency and make it more known so that we'd like as many people as we can to participate in these various commissions. So by communicating this better, by even introducing candidates at a public board meeting, could encourage people to to consider themselves to volunteer. And then I think the community has asked for us to move a little bit more toward having somebody, some extra set of eyes on the candidate selection, just so that, you just to provide another review. And I think that this accomplishes that. So I think we can move off that, I hope.
Okay, I think I've got clear direction on that. So that really concludes the committee's review and discussion of the boards and commissions. A lot's been accomplished over the last 4 meetings. So our goal is to present the committee's report to the village board at our first meeting in October.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah, is there a feedback?
Yes, there's a lot of feedback.
I'm hearing it myself and I don't know why.
You fixed it. I think you fixed it.
Let's see if is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So, we're going to strive to present the committee's recommendations to the village board at our October 13th meeting, which is the first meeting in October. That will, of course, be off the consent agenda. And at that time, what we'll likely do is also include the introduction of the ordinance, which amends the village code in terms of the number of the recommendations we had discussed previously. And that way, that gives notice to the community and the board of just exactly how those changes would look in the code. We don't necessarily have to adopt them at our next meeting in October. If there's further discussion that needs to be had, we can refine those, at our second meeting in October and then adopt it in November if necessary. But that'll keep the process moving forward as quickly as we can. And then we'll look to fill the vacant positions on the Housing and Human Relations Commission as quickly as we can. And we certainly want to give the public an opportunity to complete their TBQs and submit applications. So this is going to take a few months. Our goal would be to have these appointments made by the end of this calendar year. But just keeping in mind our schedule, and if we go to the board for an initial discussion on October 13th, if there's at least enough support at that time from the board to move forward with recruitment, we can do that right away. We probably want to give at least 3 weeks. We'd be looking at late November, for those appointments to possibly be brought to the village board, and we only have one December meeting. And that would be very fast, just given the type of process that we just discussed, and those extra sets of eyes and that input is going to just slow the process down. And that's okay. I think it's the right approach, but I think we just all should have reasonable expectations that we may not be able to complete these appointments possibly into early January. But we'll do everything we can to move as quickly as we can.
Good.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Okay. So that continues kind of our discussion on the boards and commissions, I believe. So the next item on the agenda is new business. I don't believe there's any new business unless, Mike, you have something, or Peter, or Dan, you have any new business you'd like to bring up?
I do not.
No.
I see.
No,
Okay.
I would just, commend the work that's been done. I think you guys should be very proud of leading this, Kathy and Mike, and I know a lot of people gave input. So great job leading this, and well done.
Thank you. Okay. I'm actually going to make a few closing thoughts, but let me just okay. So then I'd like to open up for public comment. So now this would be if anybody would like to speak on a not on the boards and commissions. So something if they'd like to bring another topic to our attention. So I guess, let me see. So I guess, let me just read just to follow the rules here. So I guess for those of you who would like to speak, I just want to send a reminder that you're allotted up to 3 minutes to comment on an item not on the agenda. This meeting is being conducted remotely, so we're going to first start by asking people on YouTube Live if they would like to speak. Or if you would like to, please, make that known now by submitting your comments to staff. And while we're doing that, why don't I ask if there's any individual who's connected to our meeting via Microsoft Teams. If you'd like to unmute yourself now, say your name if you would like to speak, and then we'll see if how many people would like to do that, if any. I'm just going to give everybody a minute or so.
Van Gilmer.
Okay, so Van, you'd like to speak again on an item that we haven't already covered?
Well, I haven't spoken tonight. I'm pretty much ruled out after I listened to what you said we must speak about. But I have a concern that I think has to be thought through.
Okay, okay, so hold that thought for a minute, Van.
Sure.
Okay, Alex, is there anybody else? Okay, and then, so Alex, have we received anything?
There have been no additional comments on YouTube Live, if that's what you're asking for.
Okay. Okay, so, okay, yeah, so, Van, obviously, if you'd like to, you could speak if you'd like to. Please note that we, at this point, have already completed our discussion on this. But we would love to hear from you, and if there's anything, we can make sure it will be included in the material that's presented to the board, and we can always address that topic then. So thank you, and I apologize, Van, if you didn't feel you had an opportunity and didn't recognize that you didn't feel you had an opportunity to speak at the beginning of the meeting. My apologies to you on that.
Shall I start?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I didn't speak in the beginning because I had read through the comments you've already received, and I agree on them. One of my problems, it's an individual problem, is that I have not been active in Wilmette in any of its boards or anything to do with it, except for affordable accommodations a few years ago. And so I don't know this process. And even as I listened to it tonight, I counted 6 or 7 mentions of the village president's involvement. And I wondered, who then is the selecting official on any of the things you do? Particularly these commissions that are coming up. If a person is involved all the way through, who becomes responsible in the end? Not this old, just a rhetorical question, but when you think of transparency, sure, there can be complaints about selections if a person touches every piece of it. Another, I'm running on through. I am, if you see me, I'm African American. I wonder, after being here 13 years and not feeling the need to be involved at all, I feel reluctant to speak or reluctant to tell you how much I feel about these for fear of it's I'm just volunteering out in the open. Yes, I want to be on one of these commissions. And yes, I have a lot to offer to them. But you don't have but so many people you can look at. And I don't know where they are when I'm thinking about the involvement of Americans of African descent. I can just tell you, all these years I ride through Wilmette, I don't ever see any. Recently, we had a rally, and a Black woman came up to me and she said, "I live in Wilmette. You live here?" I said, "Yes." She said, "I've been living here 10 years. I said, "I've been living here 13 years. She was upset that we have not seen each other or don't know each other. So when you think about trying to attract somebody, how do you attract somebody? I read the words, they're all the right words, but now I'm wise enough to know you can write the right words and not do the right thing unless you push hard. So how do you identify people? How do you make them feel like they should be involved? I've been here a long time. I haven't felt like I should be involved, and yet in my heart, I felt it. I'm only now seeing that I cannot be a citizen of the Wilmette Village and not in some way at least speak up now and then. So I'm reluctant to say much because I know I could be visible for a position. I could be qualified for a position. And I come forward to say, I'm concerned. I'm concerned about Wilmette. Wilmette has been this way forever. What makes us think it will change if we don't do something extraordinary? So I just wanted to put that out so that you know there could be others like me. I don't know. There could be others who have just thought there's no place. Let me just live here and do my job. I want to do more than that. I'm through.
I will thank you. That was really appreciate your thoughtful words, and we will be sure to consider that as we present this to the village board. And I hope to have some further discussions with you, Van. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, so let me just go back to the agenda. Well, Alex, I don't believe there was anybody else that wanted to speak.
Nope, there were none. No additional comments.
Okay, so before we call the roll to adjourn, I just want to make a few very quick closing comments. So first, I just want to thank all of you who have participated in this process and who have attended our 4 meetings. Many of you that I can see on here have attended all of our meetings, and I really appreciate that. Your feedback has been very valuable to me and the rest of us on this committee, and I hope you feel that your feedback was heard. I want to thank Dan and Peter for their time. A lot of time goes into these topics, these meetings, preparing for the meetings, reaching out to members of the community, talking with staff, and I just appreciate your time and dedication you both made to this process. It's been a very important process to me, and clearly you both have shown that it's important to you. I'd also like to just thank our legal counsel, Jeff Stein, who has spent a lot of time talking to over this, and then also a lot of time, and I really appreciate our village manager, Mike Brayman. Mike and I have spent a lot of time since our first meeting in July on this process. Mike, you've just been an excellent resource, and Mike is just so incredibly balanced, very thoughtful, very patient, and you've just really helped us get to a better place, and so I'm very appreciative of that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, tonight might be our last meeting as we get ready to prepare our report. I want to let everybody know it doesn't have to end here. I view changes like this as a starting point, and there might need to be a few tweaks down the road, and that's okay. And some of those tweaks could come after we make our presentation to the board. So I just encourage all of you, first of all, to have some patience as we work through this process, as we start to implement these changes. But also feel free to reach out to me or any committee member if you have suggestions. This committee member obviously at some point will be meeting again on another topic, but we can always reconvene if we need to, if we feel like we need to make some changes or some further recommendations to the board. And so I just, please continue to make your suggestions. When we started, we had a lot of work in front of us, but I'm very proud of what we accomplished, as Dan said, and I think we've really done a lot. Of course, first and foremost, we're going to be recommending to the board that we get the Housing Commission, Human Relations Commission up and running and chartered with a mission and purpose that I feel is really going to enable some great work to be accomplished by these groups. And I'm very excited about it. It's an important time, and these are very important issues to our community. And so I hope that everybody else does that. In addition, we have received some really good comments, in addition to obviously getting the Human Relations and Housing Commission started, just about increasing diversity on our commissions, improving communication to our residents on the talent bank questionnaire, as well as the overall process of how people are selected. And then I think tonight we made some really good progress on in making some improvements to our selection process that I think many of you in the community have really looked for us to do. These are all important changes, and I hope they're ones that our board will approve and the community and all of you can see to fruition. So in closing, I just want to encourage all of you to inform residents of kind of what you've been able to listen to, and encourage people to submit a talent bank questionnaire if they're interested in one of these two commissions or any commission, or if you know of somebody, to reach out to one of us on the committee here, of a friend who you might think would be qualified. This is the time to do it. We're looking for all different kinds of members of the community, and we want to get people involved. So we need dedicated and committed people to these commissions. So thank you for everybody for your patience, for lasting through these 4 meetings with us, especially in this new environment. So I'm just very grateful to everybody's time and commitment. So thanks again. So with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Can I make a public thank you to all 3 of you folks for all of your work? This is, I think often forgotten that you folks are volunteering too, and you're putting yourself out there to make the village that we live in a better place. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate your words.
And actually, Kathy, before and I'm happy to make the motion, but I now realize that I was given a heads up at about 2 o'clock this afternoon that we're going to discuss that amendment to the language of the statement. And unfortunately, I have a job that makes me focus on jobs, so I didn't see it until just now. So that's why I wasn't prepared for that discussion earlier today. But so
I apologize for that, actually, yep. Dan. I didn't.
Unfortunately, I have to work during the day, so that's why I was late. But I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay.
And I will second it. Thank you.
Okay, so Mike, can you please call the roll to adjourn?
Yes, Trustee Sullivan.
Aye.
Trustee Barrow.
Aye.
Trustee Dodd.
Aye. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.